Hello, Alison.
Hello, Edna.
And it's great once again to have a little space to talk with you and to share with others the kind of things that you and I are thinking about. And today, I think one of the things that's in our minds is actually what's going on in the wider field of our work, and a field in a general sense, but also perhaps in a literal sense, because you and I are thinking about climate emergency. We're thinking how that relates to the work you've been doing for a whole year with a fabulous group that you've been supervising outside in the open air, in the environment, and how the environment has, as it were, spoken to you and your group. So I think one of the things we're looking to do today is to extract some of the learnings from that. It's not, as it were, new in coaching, but more and supervision, but more and more of us are actually using the outside world, the natural world, to feed our imagination, our thinking. So I'm interested to hear from you some of the things that you've extracted from this year's work.
Well, thank you. I'm very excited by what is emerging, Edna. Mm-hmm. It has come about almost by popular request. My supervisees have suggested it, or my supervisees have said, let's go somewhere different. And when some of them suggested that initially, I thought, I feel a bit nervous about that. You know, espoused thinking is we create a safe container, and I associate that with a physical container. The office space or the room that is, you know, it might have flowers and it might have fruit, but it is a physical container. And what I have discovered with these people who have had such energy, and it's several different groups, mm-hmm. where they have said, let's go to an art gallery, let's go to Hyde Park, let's go to a museum.
Yeah, Eastbourne,
somewhere that is different. And what I and we are discovering is a number of, to me, very thrilling things that they don't dispel the notion of safety and containment, but it's how in supervision do we create that feeling of trust, safety, containment when we're outside, that then gives each of the participants the freedom and literal space for their imaginations to go.
Gorgeous.
Which is so thrilling because we're not compressed into four walls with a roof.
Yeah.
And I've been really struck by that recently, the notion of the potential when we're outside.
Yeah. And as you're talking, I can imagine, as it were, a new safety, a new boundary, but it's much bigger. And that the environment, the natural environment, actually holds a lot more safety and boundaryness than we would have imagined. And it also sounds as if it's really feeding your conversations together in the supervision groups.
Yes, and there are two things there that you've identified. The sense of boundary, in actual fact, is there. And what's the word for it? There's something about there is an intensity, but space to breathe in or out, which is a different level of intensity when we're sitting in a room.
Yes.
And the work I've done is with groups rather than many folks I know. Many of my clients come and they say, well, I took a client here and I took a client there. And what I'm experimenting with, and it's framed as experiment, is what happens to our group. And the group development happens in some ways in an office environment. But when we go outside, there's something about how we draw together to create our safety because of the expanse of the space that we're in, and seeing how the group evolves and grows in trust and vulnerability and willingness to explore and uncover and really dig down is gorgeous.
It sounds gorgeous. It sounds absolutely gorgeous. And I'm thinking it's almost like at the beginning of that there's a new form of contracting, isn't there?
Yeah.
As people go into this big space, and then they kind of have to figure out where they in the space are meeting and what's it doing to their inquiries, and how you guys work all that together.
Yes, and that word inquiry is right in the foreground because we go to places that some of us may know and some of us don't know, literally. So if you used Eastbourne as an example, or recently some of folks will have seen I've written about going to Kew Gardens. Well, not everybody's been to Kew Gardens, or not everybody's been to Hyde Park. So we are literally going into the unknown. We are literally not knowing what our destination is. And we are literally having all sorts of options about which direction to take in a way that's very different from our perhaps familiar, habitual, well, we're going from A to B to C in a piece of client inquiry when we're in supervision in a room.
I'm just getting the sense of vivacity, of aliveness, because of the many possibilities and the various types of the unknown, but a willingness to travel together. And I am very strongly getting a sense of this outside world, you know, the parks, Eastbourne, the sea, whatever it is, contributing. And one of the things that David Abrams says in Spell of the Sensuous is that we are humans only in contact and conviviality with what is not human.
Oh, how amazing.
So there's a kind of completion of us by the other. And I'm picking up a sense of that as you're talking about working in nature.
Yes, and there is a difference between going to somewhere like a museum or an art gallery where we are in a building again and we have the stimuli of the exhibit.
Oh, yeah.
And the noise, and increasingly many of us are becoming aware when we go into these public places of how echoey and noisy it is. And that's part of what we're all contending with now. We seldom go into a public building that is actually quiet now. So how are coaches managing that when they go into their organizational environments and their clients are not ever able to have quiet?
Exactly.
And in a curious way, when we go outside, there's sometimes a bit of traffic, but there's sometimes, as I just heard, Edna, a seagull calls, or you can hear the wind in the trees, or you might hear a fire engine or an ambulance, but it's very transitory. And there's a sense of being in touch with more of our senses. So we're more conscious of our breathing, of the visual stimuli, of the smells, of perhaps chewing a leaf or a flower, or it's fabulously thrilling, the our senses are all touched and we're in motion.
Exactly. And I would add to that something about our imagination is touched. I mean, the people who explore history of language, you know, the ancients and how they formed language, one of the ideas that comes through is that our language arises from earth sounds, the sounds of wind, the sounds of the crows cawing and all the rest of it. And we begin to mimic, and gradually we mimic so much we write down, and gradually language is formed. So you and I as coach supervisors and all the coaches who'll be listening here, we all work with language. We work with ourselves, with our imagination, with language. And now, you know, more and more practitioners are talking about working out there in the world, which the natural world, which already has fed us through centuries. And I think it's partly because of the whole business of climate emergency, which is very real, and how our attention is being piqued around that now, and our action, that we're beginning to value more what this brings to our work as we, as it were, walk out together into this environment, into this unknown, into this questing, bringing with us our, you know, bringing ourselves, bringing our inquiries, looking at, you know, a much wider canvas almost for our work.
Yes, I love that. It is a wider canvas, and there's, for me, there's a more permission to experiment with ideas, or to acknowledge, well, look at that tree over there. I wonder how that symbolizes what's going on with your client. Or, goodness me, look at those gnarled branches, or look at that tree where the branch has been blown off. I wonder how that may be symbolic of. So what I notice with us in our exploring is tuning into natural phenomena, and our capacity with our imagination to work metaphorically and symbolically, and how may these be manifestations or representations of what is actually going on in the client systems that are chaotic and unpredictable and messy.
And as you're talking, I'm experiencing almost like a relief of having to let go of the literal, of the models, of our usual habitual terrain, and anything to do, you know, with imagination, with metaphor, with the whole metaphysical way of looking at ourselves in our work, somehow just gives us so much more scope and seems so much more rich. And I think there are many practitioners now moving into that and away from the literalism of what's the best question, or indeed away from just the personal and my own psyche and why my habit's like this and how I can undo it in 3 steps. You know, we've got to get so much bigger. And I think that's partly why I'm excited about your work and the work that others are doing in this way. And I don't think we've got much longer to go, Alison. So I'm just wondering how you would like to almost wrap this up for the folks who are listening, in terms of what do you want them to take away from this? Are there any encouragements we might give to people who are still thinking, ooh, I'm not sure I could go into the forest with my clients?
As you invite me to do that, I have a sense that what changes when we go outside is that there is no right question to ask, and there's no right answer to be given. And there's much more permission to I come back to it, to explore. The whole sense of exploring is much greater.
That's really nice.
Without we must get to this corner in 10 minutes.
So all the fixedness is loosened
Yes.
in favor of a kind of trust of something emerging if we attend in a bigger way.
Yes.
Is that?
Yes, I think that's beautifully put, Edna.
Okay.
And actually, dare I mention our program that we're going to be doing next March, Beyond Models, Going Deeper, where we will be together with Miriam and Claire, we'll be exploring some of these areas to enable us to really get in touch with ourselves and connect with the other through nature, through our environment, through our self-awareness in these changing contexts.
Yeah. Well, I think that's I think that's quite a big place to end on. I feel as if we've hurtled through a kind of landscape ourselves this morning, even in 10, 15 minutes. So thank you for that.
Well, thank you. As you can probably tell, I'm increasingly enthusiastic and curious about what else emerges, A, for the folks who come and do this work, but B, my own practice as a supervisor. I'm aware of perhaps growing a la nature in a new way that's very invigorating and very inspiring for me alone, let alone for the groups that I'm working with.
And we need that refreshment. We absolutely do.
Yes.
So thanks, Alice.
Thank you, Edna. See you soon.
Indeed.